Hi everyone, good morning and welcome to our first webinar in our three-part series about maximizing remote work. This is mandatory video conferencing best practices for working remote. My name is Maggie Bliss and I'm moderator this morning. Today I'll be joined by our amazing BlueJeans product marketing team, Zach, our VP product marketing, and our product marketing managers, Mayta and Justin. Thank you guys for being here. So a few housekeeping things before we kick things off. Today we are using BlueJeans Events product, which is a one-way viewing experience. So all attendees are on mute. But if you do have any technical issues or questions, please put them in the right-hand side and I'll address those as soon as possible. And then we'll remind you at the end, but if you have questions, please put them in and we'll ask our amazing presenters and we'll go through those at the end of the presentation. Lastly, this session is recorded and we will send it to everyone after the event. So I'll kick it off to May. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Maggie, and welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. So it's certainly no news to anyone at this point that due to the current worldwide situation that we're all going through, and our hearts go out to everyone who are being affected right now, that a lot of companies are restricting travel and enforcing work from home policies in order to protect the workforce and for the health and safety of everyone. Some of the bigger companies have made news, but it has cascaded down to different organizations, such as yours probably. So you're in this new reality of working from home and trying to get the most out of it, which is where we are trying to come in and try to help you with that. From BlueJeans' perspective, we are committed to ensuring that our service is up and running so you are able to provide that same level of work and be able to do the daily work that you do every day. We're seeing that our usage and our meeting minute volumes have increased dramatically in these different locations all around the world as the virus is also spreading. So as a video conferencing company, we also have perspectives on how you can improve on this situation and do the best that you can do. So we have come up with this three-part webinar series. This is the first one, and thanks for joining us, which is about the tips and tricks on how best to do your remote work from home. And then next week, we have two coming up, which is the first one is on the 17th, which is a hands-on training about the ins and outs of BlueJeans video conferencing. If you're used to it or if you're new to it, you can get up to speed on how the best way to take advantage of it. And then on the 19th, we have, for IT admins, we have a webinar coming up for rapid deployment of BlueJeans so that you can get it throughout your organization and get it to your users across the board. So join us for those coming up next week. So today we'll be discussing three aspects of working remotely. As Maggie said, we are all part of the same team. I'm Mayta, and I actually am a full-time employee who usually works from the office in our San Francisco office. But for now, like many of you, I'm currently working remotely. And I'm followed with Zach, who manages our team, and he'll be talking about how to establish trust in how to actually get the most out of the team itself. And Justin will be following up with how to provide tips on setting up the best home office environment. And he's someone who works remotely full time. He's actually in the middle of nowhere in Creston, but in Colorado. And he'll be talking about the best practices in terms of setting up your home office. So I'll get started. And like I said, I typically work from an office 5 days a week. And for the last week or so, I've been working from home. And I've realized that staying productive and preventing isolation is a real challenge for a lot of people. So I'm going to be talking about what helped me and what helps a lot of other remote workers that we've talked to. So it's really important to actually have a strategic and proactive mindset. So one of the biggest challenges is staying focused and trying not to get distracted because you're at home and you're not in your usual office environment. So the first thing that I've realized that really helped me was finding a dedicated workspace. Now for you, that can be your home office. It can be a dining room table, something that you feel comfortable and gives you the sense of a work environment like you have in the office. The second thing that I want to talk about is actually managing a calendar to meet with your coworkers and your managers, your coworkers, your reports, and time blocking it because oftentimes these interactions would happen organically in the office, but now you have to actually be proactive about it. While we do maintain to-do lists and deadlines, it's even more important now that we're working from home because we have to be a little more focused, and I try not to get distracted. So maintaining that is really important, even more so now. And then one thing I really find really helpful is that having status updates on chat. So like showing presence to see other people's availability versus focus time. And I provide the same for my colleagues as well. So they see like whether they can just hit me up with a quick chat or if I'm like really heads down doing something. Speaking of chat, we try to initiate a quick chat culture in this team. So initiating and accepting quick meetups. So we get on Slack and we ask each other, hey, do you have a second to talk through this issue, rather than just go back and forth over email and so on. And we quickly get on a video call to resolve things in real time. And I personally like using emojis. Like my favorite is a thumbs up to like show responses very quickly. And the next thing I want to talk about is actually going through the day and how you handle your days. So opening and closing your day strongly. So a big part of that is how you communicate. If it's possible, saying hello at the end of the day with the people you work with is great. It's like walking into the office and sharing, hey, how is it going? What'd you do this weekend, or what'd you do last night, or something, you know, that would have happened normally in the office. Now you have to sort of try and replicate with either video conferencing or just chatting on Slack or Teams and so on. Catch up personally with people who you would typically talk to over video call, and then share and talk proactively about your work and ask about what other people are working on is also super helpful, because that's not really happening when you're isolated at home. And also be a little considerate of others' work style. And by that, I mean, not everyone may always be open to like getting on a call or something. So try and like work around that and see where you both are feeling comfortable. It's important to also take care of yourself. So taking a break and ending the day. So maintaining your health, standing up. Like I have a watch that tells me to stand up whenever I'm sitting for too long. So I find that helpful. I have a snack room, which is basically my kitchen. I make sure all my snacks are somewhere far away from my desk. So I'm having to like move around. Getting fresh air and listening to some music is often great. It provides a sense of like reality rather than like being heads down at work. And finding a good stopping point. For a lot of us, usually a stopping point in the office would have been like commute times or like train schedules and so on, which we don't have here at home. So finding one that works for you, whether it's like making dinner or whether it's something else that works for you, is really important, so that you're actually able to stop and not just keep on working for as long as you possibly can. And that can result in burnout, so we don't recommend that for anyone. So I hope you found that helpful, and we are now going to be handing it over to Zach to talk about how to manage a remote team.
Great. Thanks, Maytaz. And I think those tips are really helpful, as she said, regardless of if you're an individual contributor or a manager, trying to stay focused and be disciplined, give yourself the benefit of the doubt and taking a break. Those are all, I think, powerful ideas when you're working remotely. Kind of thinking about it from the manager perspective, I think that the name of the game here is really all about trust, trusting that your employees are going to be getting the job done, that they're doing what it takes to be productive, and really helping them and coaching them and ensuring that they're able to do that in a successful way. So I think what you'll find in some of the tips and tricks that I've got here is it's really all about establishing that trust with your remote team and figuring out the best way you can create that two-way dialogue that ensures you're driving forward and aligned against the same goals. So when thinking about, being an in-office manager, I work in San Francisco. I've got some team members there. I've got Justin in Colorado and others around the world. You kind of have to do the same things, right? You're still helping your team drive forward, put a plan together, execute. But it's also slightly different when you are not in the office every day. And I think one of the big pivots that managers need to make is they need to change kind of their focus and kind of reframe really what the objective should be when they're thinking about managing their team. And I know this isn't the case for every manager, but many managers kind of look at their team and by tracking individual daily tasks. And when you're in the office, that makes a lot of sense because you're maybe next to those folks or you're interacting all day long and you kind of have line of sight into those very specific projects. And so you're kind of managing those individuals just by saying, hey, how's everything going every day? You're kind of in the mix. But obviously, when you move to a more remote work program, you're not going to have that same line of sight. You're not going to have that same visibility, and you're not going to be connected all day long. And so that really requires kind of a opening of the aperture, if you will, and trying to think about outcomes less than the actual daily tasks. And so the way I like to think about that is really stop managing day-to-day interactions and start thinking about the overall roadmap and the objectives that you're trying to accomplish, and thinking about ultimately what are we trying to drive towards, and managing your employees more towards those outcomes versus what they're doing every single day. That establishes trust because you're not micromanaging them and you're not trying to bother them and slack them and ping them all day long, and it gives them the space and freedom to get their job done. I think that's kind of step one, is really thinking about how you're providing your coaching and how you're providing your guidance, less around the individual day-to-day and more about the longer term period. Second, I think that what's critical in helping remote team members is really helping them connect the dots between the organization. Obviously, as a manager, you're in different types of meetings than the individual contributors on your team. And I think one of the things that gets lost in the mix and the shuffle is that if you're an individual contributor, you may hear people's names from time to time, but you don't actually know what their jobs are. You don't actually know what projects they're working on. And I think if you're in an office environment, you're walking next to people, you're seeing them in the cafeteria area or the lunchroom, seeing them go into conference rooms. You kind of have this additional sense about who those folks are. But when individuals are at home or in a work from anywhere culture, you don't really have that visibility. I think it's managers' responsibilities really to help their teams build their network and understand who can help them get their job done. And I think it's really the manager's responsibility to help paint out what the organization is working on and really carve out and introduce, who can help their team members be productive. And so I think that's really the second tip, is really connecting the dots for your team and enabling them to make connections so that they can be productive, and kind of eliminating that physical barrier to actually understanding who else is in the organization. And then kind of the third tip that I've realized over time is that, when you're in an office environment, you think that you have this kind of open door policy and people are going to pop in all the time, or maybe you manage by walking around and you pop over to your team's desk and you see how things are going. Well, obviously, in a remote work environment, you don't have those opportunities. And so it may be intuitive to think that, well, now that we're not all working in the same office, people can still ping me on chat and we'll have this kind of free-flowing dynamic. But what I found is that's not true. People kind of get isolated in their own day job. And so I think that managers need to take on the responsibility of not just having kind of their steady cadence of meetings, but really try to explore more working type sessions to work together. And kind of actually do the work together, as opposed to expecting your team members to go off, do the work, and come back and report it. I think there's an opportunity for more collaboration in a remote work culture that presents itself organically in more of an office environment, but it's not as, it doesn't present itself as frequently in more of a remote work environment. So I'd encourage all the managers out there to think about how they can schedule planning sessions, working sessions, and have those throughout the week so the teams are building that bond and they're actually getting the job done together. Now, obviously, communication is critical throughout all of this. And so I've got kind of 4 different communication techniques, if you will. I'm sure that most of the folks out there are actively engaging in these types of meetings, but personally for me, these are the things that work when I'm managing the remote team. Number one, it's all about that morning check-in. Everyone's going a million miles an hour, and it's nice, I think, at the beginning of every day just to check in with the team. Hey, how's everything going? And just starting that dialogue for the day. As a manager, hey, I'm here for you. Is anything kind of like burning right now that we need to take care of? Do you have kind of any questions that I can help answer? Or hey, as a manager, did I hear anything in other meetings that I really want to start to share? So I think every single workday you can build that bond and build that trust with your employees by opening the dialogue. How's everything going? It's great. Okay, have a great day. That's fine. And most days are like that. Sometimes, obviously, it gets a little bit more complex, and that's when we maybe pop into a video call to tackle some issues. But that morning check-in, I think, is critical. Just because you have a remote work team doesn't mean you should not have your weekly one-on-ones. I think they're probably even more important now, and typically mine extend well beyond kind of a 16-minute period. And I think that's because we're really trying to tackle a handful of different topics in those one-on-one sessions, especially from a remote work perspective. So as you recall, I was talking about building that roadmap, looking at those outcomes. So it's not as individual task-based when I'm meeting with my team. We're actually looking at the big picture and trying to ensure that we have each kind of block set up the way we want to, so that we're always making progress toward the goal, but I don't have to actually inspect individual tasks. Really getting those roadmap updates and trying to figure out if things are on track, if they're green, yellow, amber, red, whatever. I think that's one of the critical things to figure out in those weekly one-on-ones. But as I was just talking about and kind of doing the work together, I think you also have to explore brainstorming and trying to figure out how can we be creative together in the moment. And then obviously talking about professional development opportunities is something that, honestly, I probably don't do enough with the team, but I think it's always important to ensure that you're carving out time to do that as well in the one-on-one. And then, of course, the team meeting. I'm sure all of you have team meetings out there, and maybe they're weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. I'd encourage you the weekly one-on-one, especially with, the weekly team meeting with a remote team is critical to success. Number one, I think it's the best way to keep up culture. And so, I'd say, honestly, our team meetings are probably the first 15, 20 minutes. We're messing around, talking to each other, telling stories. And that's our culture. That's something that we've developed is a tight bond like that. And I think whatever your culture is for your team, you should carve that out, make time for it. I think also as the manager, it's your responsibility to provide any type of organizational updates in those team meetings, and then give the team members opportunities to share that information. Obviously, in a remote work environment, everyone is kind of off in their own world doing their own thing. So the team meeting gives you structure each week for everyone to share out all the things they've been working on against their roadmap. And fourth and finally, I know not everyone has kind of an agile framework they're working against or scrums that happen every week. But what I've found with our team, and we do participate in agile marketing, is that having cross-functional meetings, and we have a variety of these that happen throughout the week, it gives the manager an opportunity to observe how the team members are interacting and engaging with the other cross-functional stakeholders. And so I look to my team to lead these cross-functional meetings, and I'm more of a fly on the wall there in case anything escalates. But what I really think it provides me as a manager is just insight that these team members are kind of moving the ball forward. They have meetings outside of the Scrum meetings. They're tackling those roadmap issues, and the organization is functioning as intended. So I think if you don't have some of these cross-functional meetings set up, I think they're really valuable as a manager just to observe and make sure that all the different pieces are coming together and working as you intend. Additionally, it's a great networking opportunity. So if you kind of build up these tiger teams, you can build them up and then tear them down. That's super kind of an agile way to working. It just gives people an opportunity to meet each other. And I think, once again, in a remote work environment, it's all about building those connections, building those bonds, having the right communication, and ultimately building trust. So now I'm going to hand it over to Justin, who's going to provide some tips on setting up the best workplace environment.
Great stuff, Zach. Thank you very much for that. And it's been interesting to be on the receiving end of the manager and report dynamic. I have never worked completely remote before until I started at this job. And as Taz said at the very beginning, I'm about 4 hours in the mountains outside of Denver. So when we say remote, we really mean remote. I spend a lot of time here. And so if you're going to put in some time into your home office, you're going to spend extended periods of time there, you might as well make yourself comfortable. Try and figure out the absolute best experience that you can create so that when you do meet up with your team or with customers, it's as if you're standing face to face. And so these are the things that I have learned since I've been a remote employee at BlueJeans. Really basic stuff, home office setup, and how to look and sound your best in every meeting. Some of this might not be second nature if you're not used to doing this every day. So camera and lighting on the left-hand side, that's first and foremost. And turn on your webcam is number one. It's about adopting this camera culture. So why I kind of emphasize that is that there's so much that gets lost in translation if you're on an audio-only call. I mean, think about the facial expressions and the body language and the different expressions that you get to communicate with your team if you get to see them on camera. You see your team every day anyway, so don't be shy about turning on your camera. I do recommend using external cameras rather than the built-in integrated webcam. I personally use a Logitech camera. It does a great job. I think it's high quality and very easy to use. I can balance the lighting within the desktop app from Logitech as well. Look directly into the camera lens while you're talking rather than looking at yourself on the computer screen. And then for just a basic lighting suggestion, avoid backlit backgrounds. And so a dead giveaway when you see somebody that's too backlit in the middle of a video meeting is because the sun's behind them or a lot of lights are behind them, and they'll appear like a shadowy, silhouetted figure on the computer screen. So try and balance the light, have all the light kind of coming towards you up front, and that'll make the video experience look a bit better for the folks on the other end. And then audio and background noise, use a headset rather than your computer speakers. Why do you do that? You never miss a beat. You can hear everything that your team has said, and they can hear everything that you want to say. Situate yourself away from noisy areas like busy streets, in-home distractions, and stuff like that. Obviously, if you have spatial limitations, you've got to work around that. But if you can designate a part of your house that is just for your video meetings or your work day, definitely do that. In the large meetings, this is a good tip on, having some etiquette while you're in a big group setting. If you're with 20 or so people in a big boardroom, you don't want to be heard clearing your throat or coughing or, interrupting anyone while they're talking. So keep yourself muted if you're in those big meetings until you want to speak up, and then unmute yourself. If you're in a one-on-one with your boss, for instance, that's a different story. Keep yourself open the entire time. You don't need to worry about muting yourself or unmuting yourself because you treat those exchanges just like an everyday conversation. Other tip too about muting app notifications. If you're in a meeting with someone and you've got Slack chiming off and Outlook is buzzing with these different emails that are coming in, silence those notifications before you get into the meeting, and that way nobody is distracted while you're talking. Okay, so sharing and collaboration features. So this is pretty product specific about maximizing productivity in a few simple clicks. So one thing that's really cool about modernized video meeting platforms like BlueJeans is that you can communicate with your team and you can also share content as if you're standing right there in person and you're in the same room together. Make sure that before you start sharing content, though, you've got all those different documents and assets ready to go on your computer. You got a couple of options on the left-hand side. You can either share your entire screen, and that allows you to move freely between applications. Just keep in mind, if you're doing that, if you've got a Slack notification that comes up, the person on the other end is going to see that. So if you want to avoid that and you want an extra layer of privacy and security, just share one single application at a time. And then also if you want to share media like videos and stuff like that, for the absolute best experience, pre-upload those videos in advance and then play them back during the meeting. Or if you just want to look at stuff on the fly, it might be a YouTube video or some other video online. You can share your entire screen and play back the video that way too. And then emphasizing content. Okay, so now that you've shared these different assets and documentation and stuff like that, you really want to accentuate and make a point about what it is that you're talking about. And so BlueJeans has these different annotation and whiteboarding tools that allows you to circle or create additional emphasis on what it is you're talking about. The whiteboarding feature, very cool too. Just like you're in a conference room together and you're brainstorming, you're going through different product ideas and stuff like that, you can use these whiteboarding and annotation tools to resemble this in-person experience. And the interesting thing about that, a product manager actually wrote to me in Slack this morning and said, hey, the biggest surge in product usage over the past week has been annotation. And so that means as more people are working from home, they want to bring the team closer together by creating that in-person experience with annotation. And then finally, capturing highlights. A quick note about something that we offer at BlueJeans. When you start the meeting and you start the recording timeline at the beginning of the meeting, highlights allow you to capture 40 seconds of the conversation at a time. So in other words, anytime something important comes up, just mark a highlight, and that way after the fact, you can reference it and you can see what was talked about without watching the entire meeting in the recording, the full meeting recording. Okay, a couple of product and technical considerations as well about setting up your home office. You've got to make meeting easy. And so that means downloading the desktop app or different calendaring apps so you can easily schedule meetings with your teammates and use all of the in-app features on your desktop. Or if you're on the go and you want to download the mobile app onto Android or iPhone devices, you can easily do that. Take meetings outside, take them in your car, whatever you need to do. If you're unable to download, we understand that some companies have restrictions about stuff like that. It's okay. You can use any common browser to host or join these meetings. And then ensuring video conferencing quality, check your internet speed. We recommend at least 1 Mbps for a quality video conference. If you've got slow internet, try moving a little bit closer to your router, or do what I do. I plug right in with an Ethernet cable, hardwired Ethernet cable. If you're still having trouble, dial in with your audio on your phone or cancel your video, mute your video, and that way the other people can at least hear what you have to say and you can share content with them. So that's my portion of this, but I do want to invite you to our upcoming webinars. We've got 2 coming up next week. Hands-on training, the ins and outs of BlueJeans video conferencing. That's led by our support department, and so they work with customers every day. They've got great tips about how to make you more comfortable with BlueJeans video conferencing. And then later on in the week on Thursday, rapid deployment, best practices for BlueJeans admins. Tune into that if you're trying to get your deployment off the ground. Also quickly, please visit our video conferencing guide for remote work at BlueJeans.com. All of this content created by people that work from home full time. So we do know a thing or two about trying to get the job done when we're on these video conferences. And so with that, I'm gonna stop sharing here and throw it over to Maggie for some questions.
Hi, that was awesome, guys. Thank you so much. I think everyone learned a lot of great tips. So we have some questions. We'll start with from Wolf. He says he has a large iMac and adding an external camera on top of it makes it hard to look into the camera at all times. And if he has to also review and share content at the same time, he has to do that at the same time. So do you guys have any suggestions on the best setup if it's kind of hard to see your camera?
I can make one suggestion about that, just thinking up front. It's easier said than done. If you have the means, get multiple monitors. And by the means, it might be spatial means. Financially, if you can afford a couple of monitors, it makes all the difference. That way you've got one designated just for camera and one designated just for PowerPoint or whatever else. So the other team, guys, if you've got suggestions, go for it, but that's what comes to mind first.
And then Caesar says, when the meeting is being recorded, when new people jump into the meeting, do they get a notification that the meeting is being recorded? Or do you have to stop the meeting and re-record every time?
Everyone can hear a notification.
And then Mehtaj, this one's for you. What's your loudest work from home story? And do you have any advice on overcoming these distractions?
So I live in downtown San Francisco, and there's always construction outside. Like last Friday, there was these 2 guys going at it for about 5 hours with a sledgehammer outside, and it was driving me insane. But these noise canceling headphones save me, and even if I don't use my headphones, what really helps is that BlueJeans has the Dolby Voice noise canceling available as well, so it blocks out additional sound, and people can still hear me without being interrupted by that noise. I can hear it, but it's fine. But for other people who are on the call, they're totally fine. They're like, what are you even talking about? I'm like, you have no idea what it's like. So that's what I suggest. Either get a noise canceling headphone or at least use some sort of a headphone, and BlueJeans will do the rest.
Awesome. And then Zach, we have a question for you kind of about teams. Someone is asking, where and how do you hire remote workers?
Yes, that's a great question. And so when we have open positions, we put those all over the internet on LinkedIn, and whoever comes in comes in. But obviously, we look for all employees. And I think one of the things that's kind of a trend right now is that there's really a war for talent. So it's hard to find good workers because the unemployment rate is so low. So you really do have to expand kind of your search. But what I will say about hiring remote workers is that there's definitely a certain set of behaviors that you're looking for as a manager. When someone's going to be working remotely 100% of the time, there's definitely some questions from an interview standpoint that you're going to be asking around being a self-starter, being intellectual curious, being motivated, and able to actually do the job. Because while remote work is kind of currently of the essence right now, it's not for everyone 100% of the time. And so I think it behooves managers to think about some of the behavioral characteristics that make a remote worker really successful and evaluate those attributes when you're looking for talent. And I think if you do that, you're going to have a pretty good success rate, making sure that you understand what remote work is like. And I think for everyone that's going through this experience right now, we're all getting very intimate with what remote work is like. And so I think that'll make it easier, hopefully, to find those people that are working remotely and looking for full-time jobs going forward. So I think you just have to understand what you're looking for.
Yeah, and then rolling off of that, as a manager, once you have those remote workers, how do you know that your team is not slacking off since you're not watching them, you're not in the office with them?
Yeah, well, hopefully other people around the organization tell you how awesome they are. And you're like, yeah, okay, they're doing their job. But I think, it kind of harkens back to some of the points I was highlighting earlier, which is if you have the right communication protocols, you're not overwhelming your employees, you're building trust, then I think those checkpoints throughout the day and throughout the week are going to give you confidence that the work's getting done. And I think if you open up the lens and try to focus on those outcomes and really drive towards those outcomes, then ultimately you're going to be successful. So giving the team a little bit of room to breathe, but also ensuring that communication is consistent and you're doing it the right way, I think that's going to be what's really positive.
Yeah, and then Nikki asks, would it be beneficial to include experience from working at home on your resume, even if it's only occasionally in the current role? Like, is that something you would want to promote when you're looking for a new job?
Yeah, I think personally, I think that is a skill set, right? And I think it's a skill set that many of us are kind of tuning right now. But, I think when thinking about the future of work and thinking as to how organizations are going to staff their teams going forward, there's some ideas out there that it's going to be less structured, less hierarchical, and more dynamic. And so teams are going to spin up and spin down. And so I think having a remote work competency and building on that and demonstrating how productive you can be as a remote worker is something that is definitely going to be of interest for hiring organizations.
Yeah, and then someone else asked, how do you track time and activities of your remote workers?
So, that is one of the things we don't do. So I'd say that, and it depends, right? Not every job has the luxury of not tracking time. But, my kind of philosophy on that, and this is probably different than some people, is that as long as you're driving towards those outcomes, and let's say you have for us, we're in marketing, you have a big product launch, and there's, 20 or 30 different individual tasks or activities that go into a product launch, as long as we're making sufficient progress towards that product launch date, then for me, everything's going as planned. And you're able to kind of see if things are making the right progress or if they're going off the rails. And so it doesn't really matter, and as a remote worker, you tend to work longer hours, right? Because you don't have the commute, you don't have the structure of a traditional workplace. So I think that kind of moving kind of the time spend into the background and really focusing on those outcomes, less on the individual activities, more on the output. I think that is at least what we do at BlueJeans to drive success.
Awesome. And then we'll do one more question. And Justin, this one is for you. Since you work at home all the time, what tips do you have for fighting isolation and spending extended time alone?
Man, yeah, you're definitely alone a lot. I'm going to say that Pandora or Spotify is your best friend. And the beauty of it is, too, you're not going to bother anybody. Nobody's here with you working alongside of you, unless a spouse or something is home. But, crank the volume, listen to whatever you want to. If you need to really focus and get out a white paper or whatever it might be, go with the classical, turn on the hip hop, turn on the classic rock, whatever you want to do. But just that alone is worth its weight in gold. I'll also say that if you think about the folks on your team that you're really close with, just the people that you really, really relate to, you've got an ongoing inside joke, you just like talking, you observe the same things the same way, just pop into a 5-minute meeting and talk and joke as if you're standing in the hallway and hanging out. I think that actually does go a long way. And then finally, go for a walk. The other day, I know Maytaz wanted some fresh air. She went to her rooftop. She lives in the city. Whatever you can do to at least reorient yourself for a minute, get a different perspective, enjoy the day, get out of the office for a minute. It's good for your head, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And just as a reminder to everyone, this is recorded and I will send it to you after this event. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.